Amid reports of hand-wringing from Democrats about President Joe Biden's re-election chances, the New York Times is out with a new piece this morning entitled, "Perhaps Lost in the Polling, the Race for President is Still Close." In it, chief political analyst Nate Cohn writes that November's election will likely come down to just 3 states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Where have we heard that before, Joe? As Cohn points out, Biden could lose every other swing state. But if he wins those 3, he will most likely win a second term. And for what they are worth, most polls show Biden right in the mix in the Rust Belt. That includes the Time Zone recent poll with Siena College, which sparked panic among Democrats earlier this month.
It is near.
That survey also shows Biden just running about even or even slightly better than his 2020 numbers, with 2 groups that traditionally lean Republican: white voters and voters over 65. As Cohn puts it, quote, Biden has already done what would ordinarily be the hard part. The polls are not perfect. They've been off before, and they'll be off again. They wouldn't really need to be off target by much at all for Mr. Biden to squeak out a victory. But even if the polls were exactly right, in the sense that Mr. Trump would win if the election were held tomorrow by precise margins implied by the recent polls, Mr. Biden would still have a very real chance to win in November. So you've talked a lot about this, but you've also lived it, watching elections closely by experience. And it's sort of what you've been saying, although I'm all okay with the panic if you apply work to.
Right.
If panic inspires you to work hard, go for it.
Right. But over the past several weeks, Democrats have been freaking out. I'll just say, in 2016, people freaked out when we said that Donald Trump could win. In 2020, I haven't even dared to say how likely I think it is that or in 2024, how likely I think it is that Joe Biden will win, because I know everybody will freak out and say that I've got my head in the sand. You look at the numbers, you look what Biden's sitting at right now, you look at the fact that he's at a low watermark, you look at the fact that the 2 areas that he should be having the most problem with, white voters and men, older men, he's actually older Americans, he's actually doing very well. And my feeling has always been the same as what Nate Cohn said. He's already done the hard part, right? He's already done the hard part. I always say in politics, conversion is the hardest thing to do. What Joe Biden has to do now, as Cohn says in this article, is he needs to bring his base home. Black voters, Hispanic voters, young voters. Much easier to say, come home. It's going to be okay. Stay with me here. We're facing a real and imminent danger. Much easier to say, come home, than say, hey, go to that other house over there that you've never been in before. No, conversion's hard. In politics, this is my Creston Colgate theory. If your family, and I've told people this since I was 30, I say, no, don't convert. If the family's been a Crest family their entire life, they're not going to switch to Colgate. That's, 1980s, 1990s toothpaste wars. But it's like marketing. Biden just has to bring them home. And you look at these 3 states, they are very close. They are very tight. And what I always talk about is blocking and tackling. They are light years ahead right now. Light years ahead the Biden team is of organizing on the ground. Is this a pep rally for Joe Biden? No, it's not. Just like it wasn't a pep rally for Trump in 2016 when everybody said, oh, he can't win, he can't win. I said, yeah, he can. He can get 270. We were mocked and ridiculed and abused because we predicted the hurricane was coming in September and October. I'm here to tell you the freaking out, the Democratic freaking out is just so tiring. And I think the thing that bothers me the most is they're freaking out about things in a national campaign, right? They're freaking out whether it's about this obsession with the national race and the national polling, whether it's Truth Social tweets, whether it's all the crazy things and confused things Donald Trump says at rallies. That's fine. But this race is not going to be won in the courthouse in Manhattan, regardless of the outcome of the case. It's going to be won by knocking on doors in Kenosha, by planting yard signs in the suburbs of Detroit, by making sure you've got the Philly suburbs locked down and you get the margin you get, by making phone calls, knocking. I'm sorry to go so far into this, but again, the stupidity that I've been listening to over the past several months about how this race is over and, you know, Democrats are freaking out and Trumpers are so overconfident. John Heilman, it's just absolutely insane. It reminds me when I ran the first time, I would drive past state fairs and I would see all of my opponents and they would be waving to people at state fairs and I would just drive by laughing. And then I would go to a neighborhood where I knew there were what I called super voters who voted every 2 years. And while they were waving at tens of thousands of people, I was knocking on doors, shaking hands, planting yard signs. It's how I won. I didn't have money. Nobody knew who I was, but it was targeted. This political race this year is targeted. It's basically about 7, 8, 9 congressional campaigns in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania. And I thought the Nate Cohn article yesterday explained this better than any I've seen and explained why Biden, man, Biden's got as good a chance as he had in 2020 right now.
Well, good morning, Joe. And I will say, last time we were talking about the New York Times on the air, you and I were having a healthy, spirited exchange, and you were pretty angry, annoyed, irritated at that last wave of Siena battleground state polling. And I guess, someone over at the New York Times may have been listening. This seemed like a useful corrective on that front. This piece by Nate Cohn and the paper kind of acknowledging that. Without getting into any kind of debate over the methodology of those swing state polls, noting the evident truth, which is, it's a narrow path. I mean, I don't think there are very many Democrats who would not like to win. They would like to rather win this race with more than exactly 270 electoral votes. And yet, to your point, this has always been the challenge for Biden. Those 3 states, the blue wall. If the blue wall stays intact, and to your point, another way of thinking about about coming home is if Joe Biden can do in 2024 exactly what he did in 2020, he'll win those 3 states, he'll get 270 electoral votes, and he'll be reelected. As I said, I think a lot of Democrats would like to have some margin to play with. I continue to say that even in those other states, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, it's still a margin of error race in those states. And I'm going to keep saying that until it's not a margin of error race. But, to your point, about 800,000 voters across those 3 states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, 800,000 voters out of 350 million people in America. Those 800,000 voters, unlike Joe Scarborough, the Biden campaign does have money. The Biden campaign it doesn't have to bring those people home on the basis of just Joe Biden's charm. They have more money than the Trump campaign. They have more resources on the ground in those 3 states. They have more experience, having done it before 4 years ago, about how to get those people to come out. And they have other things like this trial, which, on the margin, what do they need to do to get those people to come home? Remind those people of what it was like when Donald Trump was president 4 years ago, and remind those people of who Donald Trump is. I think the trial, especially if there's a conviction, helps in that effort. So they have a lot of clubs in their bag here. And again, the path 270 is not a comfortable path to walk. That's a tight rope to walk, but it's a rope that they have walked before.
Well, and I'm with you. I'm not saying he can't win the Sun Belt states. I think people like you. People who are suggesting the Sun Belt states are gone obviously haven't followed presidential elections in Nevada over the past half century and haven't seen what's been happening in Arizona over the past 4 to 6 years. So those races are still in play. And I think if I were to criticize the Robert De Niro front, I think I would say, Willie, again, just explaining what type of race this is. I wouldn't send him down to the courthouse in southern Manhattan. I would send him to Kenosha. And I'd say, go into a living room of a union worker, just sit down and talk to him. Have the kid film it. Put it up on TikTok. Put it up on YouTube. And get in people's homes in Kenosha. Get in people's homes in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Get in people's homes where this race is going to be won or lost, and let people see you were fighting hard for every one of their votes, because that's how the next president will be elected.
Pennsylvania yesterday, President Biden was there with Vice President Kamala Harris rallying in Philadelphia. The event was the launch of the campaign's planned outreach, a big enthusiastic event speaking to black voters.
Because black Americans voted, Kamala and I are President and Vice President of the United States because of you. That's not hyperbole. Because you voted, Donald Trump is defeated former president. And with your vote in 2024, we're going to make Donald Trump a loser again. Maya Angelou said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. You got it, kid. You got it. I'm showing you who I am, and Trump has shown you who he is. And today, Donald Trump is pandering and peddling lies and stereotypes for your vote so he can win for himself, not for you. Well, Donald Trump will have a message for you. Not in our house and not in our watch. And folks, the threat that Trump poses is greater in his second term than his first. It's clear that when he lost in 2020, something literally snapped in the sky. No, I'm serious. That's why January 6th happened, when he unleashed an insurrection. Now he's running again, and he's clearly unhinged. He calls insurrectionists who stormed the Capitol patriots. Patriots. If reelected, he wants to pardon, quote, every one of them. Let me ask you, what do you think he would have done on January 6th if black Americans had stormed it? Think about this. What do you think would have happened if black Americans had stormed the Capitol? I don't think he'd be talking about pardons.
If he wins a second term, I promise you he's going to go even further. So all of this is to say, who sits in the White House matters. It matters. It matters for the people of America and for people around the world.
So, Rev, this was the beginning, really, of a concerted effort by the Biden-Harris campaign to reach out to black voters. This was at Girard, a school that's predominantly black. They're talking at faith centers, churches, kind of places you spend a lot of your time. What do they need to do do what Joe's talking about, which is just to bring the Democratic base back home and convince them that they deserve another term?
They need to keep doing what they're doing now, and even more so. You know, they've done our conferences. The President Biden spoke at our National Action Network convention virally and engaged all of us. They've gone to some churches, so as the Vice President. But I also think they need to show the contrast. When you have on one side President Joe Biden standing there, as he did yesterday at Girard, with the Vice President, who was a U.S. Senator and was the Attorney General of the state of California. Contrast that with Donald Trump, who went to the Bronx for black and brown voters, with two rappers under indictment. Which black America do you want to project, they ought to say to voters. We stood and did the George Floyd Justice and Policing executive order when we couldn't get Republicans to make it law. He stood and supported, saying we don't want to have the police help any kind of reform in any way. Donald Trump did. Donald Trump was for qualified immunity, which was in the George Floyd bill. So when you contrast what each stands for, then when you have a man saying that I've been the best president for black America since Abe Lincoln, is to call us stupid. I mean, he's really insulting our intelligence. So you've been better for blacks than FDR, than John Kennedy, than Lyndon Johnson and the Great Society, than Barack Obama. I mean, you can argue what you want to argue about what you think you did, but to say you were better than them means you think we're moronic. And I think that if they keep contrasting who they are and who Trump is, and showing what they have done. They have a record. Unemployment among blacks is lower than it's been in 2 generations. We've seen them deliver in terms of the infrastructure. We've seen them in terms of inflation reduction, how it has disproportionately helped blacks. They have a record to run on, HBCU money. Run on your record, show your contrast, show who you're running against. And I agree with Joe. Show that this is home. Donald Trump has never been home for us. He's not even been in the neighborhood, let's known the house.
It is true, Rev. Incredibly patronizing at every turn. Remember, he said, black voters like me because I have a mugshot now.
Right.
I'm one of them. Can you imagine? He thinks that's going to resonate with black voters.
Well, the way it resonates with some black voters is we remember the mugshots that he wanted all of us to have when he wanted the death penalty for the Central Park Five. So he should never bring up mugshots and blacks in the same sentence.
So, Joe, the message was there yesterday, reaching out to black voters and just taking a look at the event itself. It was a big event. The crowd was genuinely enthusiastic. And when we talk about that contrast that the Trump campaign and his supporters try to paint Joe Biden a certain way as being old or whatever it is, again, just put up the split screen of 2 events. Put up that event yesterday of the President of the United States with that crowd, and then just watch the hour or 90 minutes or however long the ramblings go on of a Donald Trump event, and tell me who's losing it when you watch those.
And, you know, and the crazy thing is just
rage posting.
Just yesterday, Willie, I had somebody I know very well call me up and tell me that, and I get this call every 3 months. Such and such, who's known Joe Biden for 50 years, went into the White House, and they were shocked and they were just appalled. He's completely lost it. He's staring off into space. He's lost control of blah, blah, blah. You know, I kept hearing this before I went in and actually had lunch with him and sat and talked to him about foreign policy for close to 3 hours and thought, gee, this guy actually, you can tell he's been doing this for 50 years because he's smarter than any politician that I've talked to. We talk to people every day, and we know who can follow us and who can't follow us. And I don't think I could get 15 minutes of foreign policy from Donald Trump. But I heard that yesterday, and then I saw this speech last night, and I'm like, Republicans just... Okay, my wife's telling me to stop saying people are acting stupid.
Yeah, you need to be more validating.
I'm going to be more validating. That Republicans are blinded by their hatred of Joe Biden, and they don't understand that they're actually hurting themselves. They always do this. They set expectations so low. Will he drool during the State of the Union? Will he be able to complete, and then he knocks it out of the park? They always set expectations low. They always lie about him. Their running thing is that he's lost his mind. He's not cogent. It's not true. So when he shows up, he wins. The expectations game. That's all politics is. That's part one of it. But part two, Sam, I do need to get back to this because my better half does say I need to validate people.
It's a scary time.
Who may be panicking over Donald Trump winning because the stakes are so high. I've said the stakes are so high. I wasn't really talking that much about Democrats other than those that are sitting in cocktail parties all the time talking about how Joe Biden's going to lose. Maybe you'd want to pick up the telephone and ask how you can help instead of whining all the time. But it is a frightening time. The stakes are higher than they've ever been. And so, obviously, I do understand why people are panicking. I guess I would just ask them to actually focus on the reality that's in front of them instead of all the things that frighten them.
Yeah, I think that one of the issues here is that not everyone recognizes the heightened stakes, right? If you look at some of these polls, we've forgotten collectively about what 2020 was like, COVID and the shutdowns, and even January 6th to a degree has receded in the collective consciousness. And I think one of the hurdles that the Biden campaign has to overcome is to remind voters of that period, that the Trump presidency didn't end in 2019. And I think events like yesterday are designed to do that. That's why he held that event. That's why he evoked January 6th during the event. That's why you hear him routinely say Donald Trump snapped after he lost election. It's to remind voters of that. Ultimately, though, I think the issue here is not so much, will black voters, will young voters, will Hispanic voters flock to Donald Trump? I mean, that's obviously the problem. I think the issue for Biden is, can he get them re-engaged? Can he get them enthusiastic about his candidacy? Or are they going to be lethargic and not engage in the political process? Because Joe, you and I have talked about this. Nate Cohn's analysis is right. And not only is it right, it's sort of counterintuitive. It's very rare, or has been rare, for a Democrat to do well with senior voters, 65 plus. Biden has done that. And these polls show that if you are a likely voter, if you are among the cohort that traditionally does go out and vote, you're maybe inclined to vote for Joe Biden over Donald Trump. That is rare. It's usually Democrats who need to engage the less active, the more passive voting crowd. Now Biden's hurdle is, can he get those traditional Democratic constituencies not to shift from Trump back to him, but to engage them in the political process? And I think he's just being bogged down by a lot of issues. One of them is his own reluctance to be a public communicator. He's going to step that up, obviously, as the campaign progresses. But two is obviously inflation and the war, frankly, when it comes to young voters.
Biden campaign is calling Robert De Niro's news conference outside the Manhattan courthouse a good moment. A senior campaign aide says the team viewed the Oscar winner's appearance on Tuesday, along with January 6 officers Harry Dunn and Michael Fanone, as effective because it reached non-political audiences that aren't tuned in every day. Since it was covered by entertainment networks and across non-traditional media such as TMZ and People magazine. The aide adds it came at the apex moment of Donald Trump's hush money trial. The Biden campaign says they are looking to lay out the stakes of the election and break through the Trump news cycle. So, Willie, I feel like I don't really get a sense that people are that interested in this trial, first of all. And as we were talking about yesterday, I feel like I don't want to promote confrontation in this election. That's not something I'd be looking to do, just given how dicey and divisive and mean Trump followers seem to be, especially Donald Trump himself.
Yeah, and I think part of this was to show from the Biden campaign some of that fighting spirit that you often see on the other side, that De Niro wasn't afraid to go down there and mix it up, but obviously got mixed reviews for whether or not they should have done it at all, for the staging of it and other elements on it. But you sort of read a deeper point into this. So explain first to the audience what meaning making is and what you thought about this appearance by De Niro.
Yeah, I'm going to defend my guy, Robert De Niro, not just because I'm a lifelong fan, but I actually think this was a very misunderstood and important moment, which doesn't mean a perfect, clean moment that everybody's going to love. It means that the Biden campaign, by putting him out there in this way, I think was finally recognizing something it's ignored, which is that you have to help voters make meaning in modern politics when we're in a fragmented media environment, fragmented attention economy, everybody's getting things from different places. Meaning doesn't make itself. A trial doesn't organize itself into a narrative in people's heads on its own. A trial could be interpreted by people as Trump is being persecuted because he's fighting for me, or a trial could be interpreted as this guy's a lifelong criminal who finally is facing accountability. That does not happen. If you talk to political psychologists, that doesn't happen on its own, right? And what authoritarian leaders like Trump, but frankly around the world, have become very good at is understanding their meaning-making role prior to asking for your vote. First, they almost play the role of the news media first. They help you array experience. They help you organize facts, the stimuli of life. They help you organize it into a story. These people are doing this to you. This other is doing this to you. And then, as a second stage, they say, vote for me and I'll solve that. What pro-democracy leaders are doing, including the president, but around the world you see this, is they just kind of ask for your vote. And they kind of have this faith that if they do the right thing, pass the right policies, do the right solar credits or build the right bridges, you will feel it and it's not It's not true. All of us are in this business because actually putting stories around things, framing things is actually very important. And this moment to me was the Biden campaign doing something a little different, which you may like or may not like, but putting meaning around this story and helping educate people about what this trial means for this campaign.
And what's interesting, Joe, is if you listen to actually the substance of what De Niro said, he wasn't talking about the trial in the courthouse behind him. He was talking about the man and what would happen if he were reelected.
Right. Yeah, and I will say, Mike Barnicle, as Molly Jong-Fast said yesterday, the knock against Democrats through the years is that they're afraid of their own shadows. They don't take chances. Whether you liked this or not, it was a Democratic presidential campaign saying, screw it, we're going to go down, we're going to get in the scrum, we're going to fight, we're going to take a fighter down there, somebody that's not going to shrink, and we're going to break through. And as Anand said, they did break through. They broke through on non-traditional news networks and programs, which is exactly where they need to go, because people that are watching news programs, for the most part, know how they're voting in the fall.
Yeah, and look at it this way, Joe. Campaigns are like movies, to play on Robert De Niro's appearance, okay? Campaigns are like movies. If you watch the Donald Trump movie, it's an entertaining spectacle. He has a story. He's an actor. He stands in front of crowds. He makes them laugh. He makes them think. He makes them angry. He's a joke, but he's very, very good at what he does. If you watch the Democratic campaign, there's no plot to the story they're telling other than what Anand just said. Vote for me. So the Democrats have to tell their story, and their story has to be woven into the story of Donald Trump. You create a bad guy, a villain, and you tell the story of the villain, and you tell the story of the rescue that's going to come at the end of this movie that we're talking about here, and the end of the story in the movie is Election Day.
That's right. And when it is actually, you know, if it was 2008 or 2004, maybe it's a different story. But when it is literally a guy who has said he wants to be a dictator on day one versus a pro-democracy leader, if you can't spin that into a story, then there's something wrong. And Joe said this half sentence of a thing that I think is so important, actually, which is being afraid of your own shadow. I would put it this way. I think American democracy is at risk because of the Democratic Party's risk aversion. There is a real risk aversion that is the dominant culture of the party, just not wanting to do weird stuff, not wanting to do stuff like this, not wanting to get a little bit messy, not wanting to do things that are going to, you know, alienate a third of people. And I actually think risk aversion here, these are folks I talk to, you talk to. This is something I know they are struggling with on the inside. There are many, often younger people in these spaces who want to do things that they're not being allowed to do. And I would just say, if you are running against fascism in 2024, maybe a little less caution, a little more boldness, try some stuff.
Yeah.
Huh.
And David French,
I don't disagree.
I know you felt the same way I did back when we would watch presidential races between Democrats and Republicans growing up. So often the Democrats were afraid of their own shadow. It was hilarious watching them being stiff and stumble their way through, going, well, can I say this? No, I can't say that because I'm going to offend this group, and well, maybe I can say, and then they'd cut themselves off because they're afraid they're going to offend this group, and that group. I think the first real break in that was Barack Obama. Obviously, Bill Clinton knew what he needed to do to win, but Barack Obama in 2008, you could tell. He wasn't scared of his own shadow, and so he became the first Democrat since FDR, I think, to win two times with a majority of the vote.
Well, you know, one of the things that's really interesting right now is that Biden's big problem is that he isn't breaking through with the voters who don't pay much attention. And this is a huge issue for the Democrats. They're doing well with repeat voters, with the people who consistently vote, high propensity voters. But he's got a bunch of people out there, Joe, who are leaning Trump, who are completely disengaged from politics. And think about how challenging that is as a group to reach. Does Robert De Niro break through with them? Maybe, maybe not. It's very difficult to say, hey, we need to do this messaging change and this messaging change. to reach people who aren't paying attention at all and who are actually, in many ways, the backbone of Trump's polling lead at this moment. And so I totally agree with the idea that you cannot run a timid campaign when you actually have to break through into the lives of people who are disengaged from politics, who don't pay any attention. And so how to do that, that's above my pay grade, but there's absolutely a need to break through with people who aren't paying attention.
Donald Trump's criminal trial, we cannot predict what the jury will do. If Donald Trump is indeed found guilty, the question is what happens next? And that is the question posed and answered by our next guest. Senior political reporter at Rolling Stone, Aswin Subsang, joins us now. And Swin, you write about how Trump and his allies plan to respond to his criminal cases if he is reelected. But what about a conviction? Like, just start us off there. What does that look like?
Sure. Well, it's not only if he's convicted, it's if he's convicted in, say, jurisdiction like Manhattan or in a state, because obviously a criminal trial is pending in Georgia. It's almost certainly not going to happen before the election year is over, but in theory, it could start in 2025. So just to back it up for a moment, if Donald Trump is reelected at the end of this year, he and his government in waiting have a sprawling plan for using the Justice Department to shut down criminal investigations that have been going into him on a federal level. So the two Jack Smith probes, if he's reelected, you can kiss goodbye to them. A problem for Donald Trump is that the criminal investigations going into him on a state level, he can't just pardon or use the DOJ in that situation to shut his way out of it. So what he has needed is a plan, an ideological MAGA blueprint for how to wield the federal government to help him get out of that bind. So in our reporting at Rolling Stone, what we found is that in recent months, he has been calling around to closely aligned lawmakers on Capitol Hill, Republican attorneys and other close associates and powerful Republicans to try to figure out what laws could potentially be passed if he has an opportunity to sign them again in 2025 or after. Different ideas have been kicked around. But first and foremost, perhaps, is this idea that he's now closely gravitated towards, which is, okay, we need to have the House and the Senate pass a law that makes it an option for former vice presidents or former presidents, wink, wink, Donald Trump, of the United States to have their criminal cases or civil cases moved from certain jurisdictions automatically to federal court. Now, the reason that kind of technicality or protocol would be important for a potential second Trump administration is it would give the Trump DOJ, the very thoroughly MAGA-fied DOJ, the opportunity to shut that down, which obviously they cannot do now in Manhattan, in Georgia, and in other places like that. So this is just
so basically what you're saying, Swin, is that he would not. You would not have state DAs, state prosecutors being able to bring criminal charges against former presidents. Is that what he's trying to do?
Well, you would be able to bring the cases, but then it would give a former president, when they no longer have the significant immunity and protections of the Oval Office, once they're out of office, having the option to move those investigations, those trials, I should say, to federal court. So Trump is currently a former president, so he obviously does not have those protections in places like Georgia. But if he ever becomes president again, and if this law were ever passed, and if he signed it, he could move something like the Georgia probe to a federal court and then theoretically have it shut down. It's a little bit convoluted, but it is a potential get-out-jail-free card in such a situation.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. You can shut down the federal cases, and then you can actually consolidate the state cases and move them to the feds. I think they're constitutional challenges, but thanks so much, Swin, for being with us. Hope you come back again very soon. Anand, before I let you go, I wanted to follow up your question about what authoritarians do, or people who lean authoritarian, as far as creating this environment, creating this narrative. I'm curious. Different types of authoritarians, obviously, and there's a sliding scale. You have Vladimir Putin, who's very repressive and not quite as effective at it. I mean, he can get what he wants done, but it comes at a very heavy cost to himself, politically, to his country, to his economy, to his military. But let's talk about Modi, who is extraordinarily successful at doing this, and explain. I mean, here's a man who is most people believe repressing Muslims, damaging democracy in India, and yet he's extraordinarily popular.
I think that's exactly right. You have to distinguish between the kind of electoral authoritarians and the non-electoral authoritarians, right? Vladimir Putin isn't worried about swing voters in provinces of Russia. That's not a problem he has. But you know, India under Modi is still, as we are in the United States, an electoral system with voter suppression issues, et cetera. But it's still a voting country where authoritarians need to win the vote. And there was a fascinating episode of The Daily, the New York Times podcast, a few weeks ago, explaining Modi's hold over India as India goes through these elections right now. And it described him as a kind of cultural omnipresence, right? He has a call-in radio show, and he's not always talking about politics on it. When students are in exam season at the end of the school year, he's just fielding phone calls from stressed out students who call him and are like, "Sir, can you give me advice about managing my exam stress?" And then he's sharing tips from his life as a tea seller turned politician turned prime minister about how to do that. And he has, of course, used those for authoritarian ends. And he is turning India into more of a Hindu monocultural state and an authoritarian state. But he has done it by being in the culture. And the Indian center-left opposition, the Indian movement parallel to the Democratic Party that is interested in pluralism, India as a country for all people. Frankly, I don't know, as someone who watches India, who speaks for it. I can't remember a speech they've given in recent years. So we have a very similar problem, and it's actually sometimes helpful to connect these dots because you get out of your silo. There is something in the modern media, social media environment that is favorable to authoritarians who understand that you have to help people see the world, right? And Joe Biden, but I would also say the opposition in India and many other places, don't understand their culture-making role. Don't understand that when people's kids are coming home saying, "I'm learning new things about American history," and that, you know, a parent is destabilized a little bit. That's normal, right? And if the authoritarian right is the only person explaining to you why American history is being taught in some new ways, and the pro-democracy side is not explaining that to you in a different frame. They're just talking about policies and infrastructure, whatever else. They're missing a lot of what's actually going on in our politics.
MSNBC political analyst and publisher of the newsletter The Ink, Anand Giridharadas, thank you very much for being on the show this morning. We appreciate your insights. And okay, so earlier this week we discussed the recent commencement address by award-winning filmmaker Ken Burns at Brandeis University, in which he reflected on what is at stake in this year's election. Take a look.
There is no real choice this November. There is only the perpetuation, however flawed and feeble you might perceive it, of our fragile 249-year-old experiment, or the entropy that will engulf and destroy us if we take the other route. When, as Mercy Otis Warren would say, the checks of conscience are thrown aside and a deformed picture of the soul is revealed. The presumptive Republican nominee is the opioid of all opioids, an easy cure for what some believe is the solution to our myriad pains and problems, when in fact, with him you end up re-enslaved with an even bigger problem, a worse affliction and addiction, a bigger delusion, James Baldwin would say, the author and finisher of our national existence. our national suicide, as Mr. Lincoln prophesies. Do not be seduced by easy equalization. There is nothing equal about this equation. We are at an existential crossroads in our political and civic lives. This is a choice that could not be clearer.
Wow. The Emmy Award-winning filmmaker joins us now. He is this year's recipient of the National Constitution Center's Liberty Medal for, quote, illuminating the nation's greatest triumphs and tragedies and inspiring all of us to learn about the principles at the heart of the American idea. And Ken, great to have you on. And I want to start right there with the American idea. I noticed everything you said jumped out at me, but I'm going to pull. You said, do not be seduced. I think that's so important in the age of the cult of Trump. But even more important, you used the word fragile. And I don't think people understand just how fragile our democracy is. Can you explain how easily it could be unraveled?
Well, I think all you need to do is go back to say, and good morning, Mika, thank you for having me. You could go back to where in 1932 you'd want to be, where everything was great with ideas in politics, in arts, in architecture, in movies, in painting, in music. There'd be no better place on the planet than Berlin. And the next January, not so much. And so what we learn from the study of authoritarianism, what we learn from the study of despots, is that these democratic institutions are fragile because the covenant of democracy is a new thing. We invented it. It said, you're not going to be a subject, you're going to be a citizen. And that requires some responsibilities. And we're going to build institutions in which we have to, just like driving down the road, we trust people aren't going to cross the line. We need to trust each other. And the despot is all about othering people and saying there's a them. There's no them, I tried to say in this. And it's really not about Joe Biden and Donald Trump. It's really about this tendency for us to other and make it just an argument and not a story. As Jen was saying, Joe needs to tell a story, but we also have a responsibility. We've been so focused in the corner of my screen. It's like we're waiting for the train wreck of the trial. We used to 9 years ago, have an airplane hangar where he was going to arrive and say some bad things that was going to shake us up. We have not allowed, the only place where trickle down works is in media. Marshall McLuhan said the medium is the message. If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, did it make a sound? If Joe Biden has the third greatest legislative accomplishments in the last 100 years after FDR and LBJ, and people don't know about it because we've been more interested in the argument of guilty or not guilty or this outrage or that outrage, we've missed our responsibility to help. So the other thing I would add, too, is that in the othering, everybody does it. We do it too. We need to reach out to Trump voters. We need to listen to them. We don't need to other them either. Their guy is doing that. We need to remind them that so many of the things that keep them at the level that they're at, that paycheck to paycheck, are there because of things that Joe Biden and Barack Obama and other people have done for them, and not allow them to be completely seduced by the story that despots always tell, that if we get rid of these people or this problem or that's the thing, that things will be better. I think it's on all of us to try to speak to each other in a way and tell stories, not make arguments.
So let me try and respond to a lot of that. Not all of it is not possible. It was incredible, but as it pertains to responsibility, I think there is a fine balance from covering the trial or looking at the consequences of a certain type of behavior, or looking at anti-democratic behavior, or looking at treasonous behavior, or looking at a crime being committed and admitted to by a former president. Ignoring that is almost being a part of what I think fascists do, which is desensitize a population. So I think it's a fine balance that nobody's perfect at striking, at looking at the accomplishments of this current president because they exist, by the way, versus And they are historic, actually. Not about us. It's not how we feel about them. They are, by every definition, historic. And so that's a balance that I think the media struggles with. But then there's the other issue of networks and websites that lie, that completely corrode the truth, that make it look like the Biden presidency has ruined the economy, and that's just where it begins. So I guess now let's talk about responsibility of the American citizenry. How do you explain that responsibility at a time like this, when you need to look at history in order to understand what has happened and perhaps shape the future, but you have a fire hose of lots of different things coming at you?
It is, well, Mika, that's the question, and you framed it so beautifully and so articulately. I don't think we entirely know the answer. We do know that, as the novelist Richard Powers says, all we do is argue, and that we need to learn to tell stories. And too often we find ourselves in silo just by the way things are, speaking to the converted. Everybody is nodding and going, yes, I agree. And what I've tried to do in my professional life is tell stories that appeal to everybody, that doesn't have a D in front of it or an R in front of it. It just has an A, an America in front of it. And to say that these are stories we share. And if we go back and reclaim a shared history that is diverse and complicated, has undertow all the elements of a good story, then we don't get stuck, as I was trying to say in my address, in which only one paragraph, the one you showed, one of 20, was about this coming election. It was really about our own responsibility to each other, not to completely always go into the binary, black or white, gay or straight, Israeli or Palestinian, that everything that we do in a kind of knee-jerk fashion. So the responsibility, I think, goes back to the ancients. It isn't even American democratic founding. It's know thyself. It's Mark Twain says, nothing so needs reforming as other people's habits. And we're always happy to tell other people what they're doing wrong. And all of the work of life, spiritually, but also collectively in our communities and, of course, in our government, speaking to your responsibility, comes from our own self-discipline, our own willingness to choose virtue over vulgarity. And that's what we've got to be out talking to people about and asking them, making those clear distinctions, as you said. And that's absolutely critical, but also telling the more complicated stories of how democracies work, because dictators always say, look, I've got the easy solution. Here's how we do it. We just take 15 million people and we get them out of here. Or we just stop the press, which is noisy over here, or we do that. And all of a sudden, people become susceptible. Thomas Jefferson said it in the Declaration. All experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable. He's saying, look, up the whole history of human beings, we have been subjects. We have been a sort of superstitious peasants under some authoritarian rule. And we're inventing this new thing, and you're going to have to be a citizen, and they're going to be individual responsibilities, obviously the first of which is vote. And that's hugely important, but also it requires being informed. You know, at the time of our revolution, a film I'm working on right now, we were reading Thomas Paine. We were reading the Walpole, New Hampshire Gazette. We were getting reports from Georgia. People wanted to be informed. Now we just listen to what we want to hear, and it reinforces how bad the other is. And what we need to do is figure out a platform. And I think both Simone and Jen were right that you need to start altering the narrative, to get out, to have conversations, to make clear distinctions, but also remind people of this fundamental responsibility that you bring up. And that's why your question is so central to the survival. Literally, I think it's an existential moment, the survival of our republic.
Ken's full commencement address to Brandeis University's class of 2024 is online now through his digital platform, KenBurnsUnum.com. An Emmy Award-winning filmmaker, Ken Burns, thank you so much. Thank you for delivering that incredible commencement address and generating this conversation. Take care, Ken.
I call it a documentary. Is that what it is?
Look at me. I reek of a rebel.
Daniel, that's his name as well.
His name is Dan?
His name is Dan. Yeah. There are 2 record stores.
And 2 Dans.
And 2 guys named Dan.
That's not Dan, but it is Dan, which is even more confusing because his name is Dan.
It's such an act of faith in the future, deciding that you want to be together for the rest of your life.
I never shot enough. You know, you have all of this crap in the house, and we want to beat you to death to get rid of it.
I always say, it's not hoarding if all your is awesome.
Words to live by. That's a look at the new documentary Flipside, a film that follows the life of documentary filmmaker Chris Wilcha as he shares snippets of various projects he started and then abandoned before they were finished, including documentaries about This American Life host Ira Glass, jazz photographer Herman Leonard, and even Chris's hometown record store, Flipside. Join us now, Flipside's executive producer, Emmy award-winning creator of some of the best comedies of the last, 20, 25 years. You know him, Judd Apatow, also the director, producer, and writer of the film, Emmy award-winning filmmaker Chris Wilcha. Guys, it's so great to have you on the show. This is such a fascinating piece of work, Chris. So I think some people maybe watched that trailer and said, what am I looking at here? What is this about? So how do you explain the project?
Well, you know, the simplest explanation, it's about creative failure. I think it's a reflection at midlife on all the things that you thought you were going to do in your life and then kind of assessing what you actually managed to accomplish or not accomplish. So it's kind of a look back, but also trying to make sense of the things you've done and abandoned, and to try to see if there's if you can make something of these abandoned projects. That was kind of the idea.
So, Chris, let's talk about how you kind of assembled all this. Was it sitting around the garage? Was it on a high shelf in your closet at home? All this material, like what drove you to want to put it all together?
Yeah, you know, it was probably mid-pandemic when I, like a lot of other people, I think was going through old hard drives, drawers full of old Hi8 tapes, mini DVs, and I was sifting through all of this material that I'd accumulated over years of my life as a, you know, documentary and commercial filmmaker, and I felt like projects that I had abandoned or had fallen apart for various reasons still had life in it. I felt like there was still energy and ideas in this material, and I wanted to try to assemble it. So I got together with an editor and some friends, and we decided to make a run at seeing if we could put this together as a film and make sense of all of this disparate material.
So, Judd, where do you come into all this? What did you see in this idea that you thought would be cool to work on?
I was very excited to work on a documentary that wasn't about a cult or a serial killer. It had never been done in the history of documentaries.
There aren't many. Yeah.
I mean, I am a big fan of Chris's work. How I got involved was many years ago, I asked Chris to do a documentary about the making of the film Funny People I was working on. And afterwards, he moved to Los Angeles to continue to make documentaries. And his mother has hated me for the last 15 years because she thinks I ruined his life. So I felt the need to support Chris in this. But it's a really interesting, hard to categorize documentary because it's about art and the price you pay to commit to it and trying to balance your family. It's a lot about hoarding and trying to hold on to the past. It's a really beautiful, beautiful movie.
Well, actually, we have a moment from the film where Judd actually gets a talking to from Chris's mom, Pat. Let's take a look.
My mom was crushed when we moved west. And there was only one person she blamed. Judd Apatow.
Hello, Pat.
Yes.
Oh, there you go. Oh, it's inside your body?
That's
the
your ear.
The iPad was inside your body. Chris tells me that I somehow led him to California and separated your whole family, and maybe I'm a destructive force.
Yes, I believe it was you who made the phone call and invited him to come to California. And I tell people that Judd Apatow took our grandchildren away. This whole trauma in my life is your fault.
I didn't even know I was paying him that well that he would leave the state.
So you were my favorite person at the time.
Yeah.
But you have so many movies and projects, and I think of you constantly. And I must say, every time I think of you as the dark man who took away my family.
So, like, if I had a movie come on cable, do you, like, shut the TV?
I like dramas.
Yeah, yes. I understand. Let me tell you something. I will be guilty about this. Like, you say it as, like, kind of like a joke, but I'll actually think on this, and I'll just be like, I can't believe I ruined Pat's life for a DVD extra.
Chris, it appears your mom is not yet over this after all these years.
No, she's fully traumatized. She, we moved to LA to pursue this job with Judd. And again, my children, the good news is my daughter just got into college and she's coming back to New York. So she will be able to see my parents anew. But my mom to this day resents Judd. Like, no joke. Like, I know there's humor in that clip, but her heart is broken.
Yeah, Judd, she maybe
Join the club.
she maybe was joking for a second and then got real serious that she resents even when she sees your movies in the drop-down menu on TV.
Well, we all prefer drama. We all prefer drama.
Hey, Chris, I want to ask you quickly about the title Flipside, because it's kind of central to the story. It's about a record shop, I believe in your hometown, not actually far from where I grew up. Why is that the title, and what's that part of the story in the film?
Well, Flipside is the record store that I worked at. It's in Pompton Lakes, New Jersey. It's still there. I encourage everyone to go visit. But I think it was also trying to look at the flip side of, your dreams, your aspirations, to look at your life and examine it from the front and the back, and to try to decide, that you can have two contradictory experiences. There's things you can regret and then still look at your life and feel thankful and joyful. So it was kind of looking at the flip side of things. But the record store is still there, and I encourage everyone to go out and make a pilgrimage, because it is a vinyl-filled treasure trove.
And by the way, the fact is, now we're going real Jersey, but you had Uncle Floyd as your narrator through that chapter of it. Fantastic. I mean, that's Jersey royalty right there.
Floyd? Were you a watcher?
Of course. Yeah. Oh, yeah, when I was growing up. So, Judd, I'll give the last word to you on this. Bigger message about this film. What is it?
Go to the movie theater and see it in a theater. It's rare to get to see a great documentary in a theater. It's playing in New York at IFC Center and a bunch of theaters around the country, and I think you'll enjoy it. And also, I'm surprised I'm not a witness in the Stormy Daniels trial, because she told us that she slept with Trump in 2006 on the set. Seth heard it. It's in our Stormy Daniels doc, and I don't know why we're not there right now as witnesses.
I think you've redeemed yourself in the eyes of Chris's mom with this film, Judd. Congratulations, guys. The documentary is called Flipside. As Judd said, it's in select theaters now. Executive producer Judd Apatow, director, producer, writer Chris Wilcha. Thank you both. Congrats on the film.